What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down for what should be a routine interview, only to find himself face to face with a host who seems determined to tear him down? What happens when professionalism meets personal agenda, and decades of mutual respect crumble in real time on national television? Today we're diving into the explosive confrontation that left Samuel L. Jackson walking off the View set and Whoopi Goldberg scrambling to save face. This is a story about power, ego, and what happens when someone pushes too far. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment, because this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about daytime television. Samuel L. Jackson walked onto the View set that morning, expecting the usual promotional circuit routine. He had a new film to discuss, some light banter about his career, maybe a few laughs with the hosts. What he got instead was an ambush that would become one of the most talked about moments in daytime television history. The trouble started before the cameras even rolled. As Jackson settled into his chair, adjusting his signature Kangol hat, Whoopi Goldberg leaned over with what appeared to be a friendly pre-show chat. But her words carried an edge that immediately put the veteran actor on alert. "So Samuel, I hope you're ready to have a real conversation today. Not just some fluff piece about your latest movie," Whoopi said, her voice low enough that the studio audience couldn't hear but loud enough for Jackson to catch every syllable. Jackson raised an eyebrow, his expression shifting from relaxed to cautious. "I'm always ready for real conversation, Whoopi. That's never been a problem for me." "Good, because I've got some questions that might make you uncomfortable," she continued, a smile playing at her lips that didn't reach her eyes. "Hope you can handle it." The veteran actor had been in this business long enough to recognize when someone was trying to rattle him. He'd faced down directors, producers, and critics throughout his career. But this felt different. This felt personal, though he couldn't understand why. When the show went live, Whoopi's introduction seemed standard enough to the viewing audience, but Jackson could hear the subtle digs woven throughout her words. She emphasized his age, questioned whether he was still relevant in modern Hollywood, and made pointed comments about actors who refused to evolve with the times. "Today we have Samuel L. Jackson with us," Whoopi announced to the audience, "an actor who's been around for what? 4 decades now, still making movies at 75, which is impressive, though some might wonder if it's time to pass the torch to younger talent." Jackson's jaw tightened slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Well, Whoopi, I'm still here because audiences still want to see what I bring to the screen. When they stop buying tickets, I'll stop making movies. But don't you think there's something to be said for knowing when to step aside? I mean, how many more tough guy roles can one person play?" Whoopi pressed, her tone becoming more aggressive with each word. The other hosts shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Joy Behar attempted to redirect the conversation toward Jackson's new film, but Whoopi steamrolled right over her. "I'm curious, Samuel, about this pattern in your career choices. You seem to gravitate toward roles that glorify violence, that perpetuate certain stereotypes. Don't you think as a black actor, you have a responsibility to choose better material?" Jackson's eyes flashed with anger. "Excuse me, are you seriously questioning my choice of roles and suggesting I'm somehow betraying my race?" "I'm not suggesting anything, I'm asking directly. When young black men see you on screen, what message do you think you're sending them?" The studio fell silent. Even the audience seemed to sense that something was going very wrong, very quickly. Jackson leaned forward in his chair, his voice dropping to the dangerous, quiet tone that anyone who knew him recognized as a warning sign. "Let me get this straight, Whoopi. You're sitting here on national television questioning my integrity as both an actor and as a black man in America. You're suggesting that I've spent 4 decades in this business, making poor choices that somehow harm my community. I'm asking legitimate questions that I think viewers deserve answers to," Whoopi shot back, her voice rising. "You've made millions playing characters that what?" Jackson interrupted, his composure finally cracking. "That entertain people, that tell stories, that showcase the range and depth of black talent in Hollywood. You want to talk about responsibility? Where was this concern when you were making Sister Act 2 or when you were hosting Comic Relief?" Whoopi's face flushed red. "Don't you dare turn this around on me. We're here to talk about your choices, your career, your impact." "My impact?" Jackson stood up, his full height imposing even in the seated talk show format. My impact has been 40 years of breaking barriers, of showing that a black actor can carry action films, dramas, comedies, everything in between. My impact has been proving that talent transcends stereotypes, something you seem to have forgotten. The tension in the studio was palpable. Cameras continued rolling, capturing every heated exchange. The other hosts looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. You don't get to lecture me about my career or my choices, Jackson continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. You don't get to sit there and question my commitment to my community when you know nothing about what I've done behind the scenes, the doors I've opened, the young actors I've mentored. Whoopi wasn't backing down. I know what I see on screen, and what I see is someone who's comfortable playing into Hollywood's worst impulses about black men. And what I see, Jackson replied, his voice now filled with barely controlled fury, is someone who's forgotten where she came from. Someone who's become so comfortable in her position that she thinks she can tear down other black actors to make herself feel more important. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Whoopi's mouth fell open, clearly not expecting Jackson to fight back with such force. She had pushed him, expecting him to back down or deflect. But instead, she had awakened something fierce and uncompromising. How dare you question my commitment to my community? Whoopi sputtered, her carefully constructed television persona beginning to crack. I've been fighting for representation and equality in this business since before. Since before what? Jackson cut her off again. Since before I was doing the same thing. Since before I was taking roles that other actors were afraid to take because they were too challenging, too complex, too real. You want to talk about fighting for representation? I've been that representation for decades. The studio audience was completely silent now, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't the usual light-hearted celebrity interview or even a heated political debate. This was personal, raw, and getting more intense by the minute. Joy Behar made another attempt to intervene. Maybe we should take a commercial break now. No, Jackson said firmly, his attention never wavering from Whoopi. I want to finish this conversation. I want to understand why someone I've known and respected for years decided to ambush me on national television with accusations about my character and my commitment to my people. Whoopi's hands were shaking slightly, but whether from anger or nerves was impossible to tell. I'm not ambushing anyone. I'm asking the hard questions that need to be asked. Hard questions. Jackson laughed, but there was no humor in it. Hard questions would be about the craft, about the industry, about the challenges we face as artists. What you're doing is character assassination disguised as journalism. The words character assassination hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Whoopi's face contorted with rage, her carefully maintained television composure completely shattered. She leaned forward aggressively, pointing her finger directly at Jackson. Don't you sit there and act like you're some kind of victim, she spat. You've made a career out of playing the angry black man, and now you want to get upset when someone calls you out on it. Jackson's eyes narrowed dangerously. Called out by who? By someone who thinks she's appointed herself the moral authority over black actors in Hollywood. Who gave you that power, Whoopi? Nobody gave it to me, I earned it. I've been in this business fighting battles while you were still doing theater in New York, thinking you were better than everyone else. The personal nature of the attack was unmistakable now. This wasn't about his recent film or even his career choices. This was about something deeper, something that had been festering between them for years. So that's what this is really about, Jackson said, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper again. This isn't about my roles or my impact on the community. This is about your ego. This is about you feeling threatened by someone who never bought into your version of how black actors should behave in Hollywood. Whoopi shot up from her chair, her voice rising to match her elevated position. Threatened by you? Please, I've won an Oscar, an Emmy, a Grammy, and a Tony. What exactly would I be threatened by? The fact that I never needed your approval, Jackson replied calmly, remaining seated but somehow still commanding the space. The fact that I built my career without kissing the right rings, or playing the politics you seem to think are so important. The fact that after 40 years I'm still here, still working, still relevant, without having to tear down other actors to make myself feel important. The studio was dead silent, except for the hum of the cameras. Even the technical crew had stopped moving, transfixed by the verbal warfare unfolding before them. The other hosts looked like hostages in their own show. "You think you're so much better than everyone else?" Whoopi continued, her voice cracking with emotion. "Walking around Hollywood like you're untouchable. Like your reputation is so pristine that nobody can question you." "My reputation speaks for itself," Jackson shot back. "I don't need to attack other people to build it up. I don't need to use my platform to tear down fellow actors who've done nothing but show me respect for decades." "Respect?" Whoopi laughed bitterly. "You call it respect when you ignore people. When you act like you're too good to engage with your peers. When you treat award shows and industry events like they're beneath you." Jackson finally stood up, his full presence filling the space between them. "I call it maintaining my dignity. I call it not getting caught up in the petty politics and backstabbing that you seem to thrive on. If that makes me seem aloof to you, then so be it." "Petty politics." Whoopi's voice reached a fevered pitch. "Is that what you call advocating for better representation? Is that what you call fighting for opportunities for other black actors?" "No, I call that Tuesday," Jackson replied coldly. "The difference is I do it without making a spectacle of myself. I do it without needing credit or recognition. I do it because it's the right thing to do, not because it makes me look good on television." The accusation hit Whoopi like a physical blow. Her mouth opened and closed several times before she could find her voice again. "You sanctimonious, arrogant." "Careful," Jackson warned, his voice cutting through her rising hysteria. "You're on national television. Whatever you say next is going to follow you for the rest of your career." But Whoopi was beyond caring about consequences now. Years of resentment, jealousy and frustration were pouring out of her like water from a broken dam. "You think you're so perfect, so above it all, but I know the truth about you, Samuel. I know about the tantrums on set, the directors you've clashed with, the co-stars who can't stand working with you." Jackson's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his demeanor. His voice became even quieter, more controlled. "Is that right? And where exactly did you hear these stories, Whoopi?" "From the same people who've been feeding you information to use against me in this interview." The question caught her off guard. Her eyes flickered with something that might have been panic. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. This whole performance, this orchestrated attack, it didn't come out of nowhere. Someone's been whispering in your ear, filling your head with gossip and half-truths, encouraging you to go after me. The question is, why are you letting them use you?" Whoopi's face went pale. "Nobody's using me. These are my questions, my concerns." "Your concern?" Jackson laughed, but it was a sound devoid of any warmth. "You've had these concerns for how long exactly?" "Because we've been at the same parties, the same industry events for years, and this is the first I'm hearing about them. Funny how these concerns only surface when there are cameras rolling and an audience watching." The other hosts were looking back and forth between them like spectators at a tennis match. But this was no game. This was a public dismantling happening in real time. "I've always had these concerns," Whoopi insisted, but her voice lacked the conviction it had carried earlier. "I just never had the platform to address them directly." "Never had the platform?" Jackson's eyebrows shot up. "You've been hosting this show for years. You've had a platform every single day. But you chose today, when I'm here to promote my new film, to turn this into your personal vendetta. Why today, Whoopi? What's really going on here?" Sarah Haynes finally found her voice. "Maybe we should really take that commercial break now." "No," Jackson said firmly, never taking his eyes off Whoopi. "I want an answer. I want to know why someone I've known for years, someone I've always treated with respect, decided to use her television show to publicly attack my character and my career." Whoopi was breathing heavily now, her chest rising and falling with the effort of maintaining her composure. "You want to know why? Because I'm tired of watching you coast on your reputation while other actors, better actors, get overlooked. I'm tired of watching Hollywood hand you roles that could go to younger, hungrier talent." "Younger talent like who?" Jackson asked. "Name them. Tell me which specific actors you think deserve my roles, and explain to me why they're more qualified than I am." The challenge hung in the air. Whoopi opened her mouth but no words came out. She hadn't expected to be pressed for specifics. Hadn't prepared for Jackson to call her bluff so directly. "That's what I thought," Jackson said quietly. "This isn't about other actor. This isn't about representation, or opportunity or any of the noble causes you're trying to hide behind. This is about you and whatever personal issue you have with me." "I don't have a personal issue with you," Whoopi protested, but her voice was weak now, the fight going out of her. "Then explain this," Jackson gestured around the studio. "Explain why you ambushed me on national television. Explain why you've spent the last 20 minutes trying to tear down my career and questioning my integrity. If this isn't personal, then what is?" Whoopi looked around the studio as if seeing it for the first time. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of her meltdown. The audience was staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to disappointment. Her co-hosts were looking anywhere but at her. She had painted herself into a corner with no graceful way out. "I just think," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I just think that actors in your position have a responsibility to use their influence more wisely. And you appointed yourself the judge of how wisely I use my influence." Jackson asked, "Based on what qualifications? Based on what authority? Who are you to sit in judgment of my career or my choices?" The questions kept coming, each one landing like a hammer blow. Whoopi had started this fight expecting to dominate, to expose what she saw as Jackson's flaws and hypocrisies. Instead, she found herself being systematically dismantled by someone who had decades more experience dealing with hostile interviews and personal attacks. Whoopi's silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. The weight of Jackson's questions hung over the studio like a storm cloud, and everyone could feel the electricity in the air. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, smaller but somehow more venomous. "You know what your problem is, Samuel? You think you're untouchable? You think because you've been successful, because you've made money, that puts you above criticism." Jackson shook his head slowly. "No, Whoopi. I think criticism should be fair, honest, and based on facts, not personal grudges dressed up as journalism. What you've done here today isn't criticism, it's a hit job." "A hit job?" Whoopi's voice cracked as she tried to regain her footing. "I'm asking legitimate questions about your career choices, about the messages you send through your work." "Legitimate questions?" Jackson's voice rose for the first time, his composure finally showing cracks. "You started this interview by questioning whether I'm too old to be acting. You've attacked my choice of roles, questioned my commitment to my community, and suggested that I'm somehow harmful to young black men. And you call that legitimate?" The studio audience began to murmur among themselves. Some were shaking their heads in disapproval, clearly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. Others were leaning forward, unable to look away from the train wreck unfolding before them. "I call it holding you accountable," Whoopi shot back, but her words rang hollow now. "Accountable to who?" "To you." Jackson laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the studio. "I'm accountable to my family, to my craft, to the audiences who pay to see my work, and to myself. I'm not accountable to someone who's decided to make me the target of her personal frustration." Sunny Host finally attempted to intervene. "Maybe we can redirect this conversation towards something more positive." "No," Jackson said firmly, holding up his hand. "I want to finish this. I want everyone watching to understand what really happened here today." He turned back to Whoopi, his eyes blazing with controlled fury. "You had an agenda coming into this interview. You didn't invite me here to talk about my new film or my career. You invited me here to tear me down. And you thought I would just sit here and take it. I invited you here to have an honest conversation." Whoopi insisted, but her voice was shaking now. "Honest?" Jackson's voice dropped to that dangerous whisper again. "There's been nothing honest about this from the moment I sat down. You've been dishonest about your intentions, dishonest about your motivations, and dishonest about the purpose of this interview." He began to remove the small microphone clipped to his jacket, his movements deliberate and purposeful. The gesture sent a clear message that reverberated through the studio. "Samuel, wait," Joy Behar said quickly. "Let's just take a step back here." "No, Joy, There's no stepping back from this. Jackson's eyes never left Whoopi's face. What happened here today crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. This wasn't television, this wasn't entertainment, this was an ambush designed to humiliate me on national television. Whoopi seemed to realize what was happening. You don't have to leave. We can finish the interview properly. Finish it properly? Jackson stood up, dropping the microphone onto his chair. How do you properly finish an interview that was never conducted in good faith to begin with? How do you properly finish a conversation with someone who came prepared for war while pretending to offer hospitality? The cameras continued to roll, capturing every moment of what would become one of the most replayed clips in talk show history. Jackson adjusted his jacket with dignity, his composure returning as he prepared to make his exit. I've been in this business for 40 years, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent studio. I've dealt with difficult directors, hostile journalists, and challenging co-stars, but I've never in 4 decades been treated with such blatant disrespect by someone who should have known better. Whoopi's face was flushed red. Whether from anger or embarrassment was impossible to tell. You're being overly dramatic. This is just a conversation between colleagues. Colleagues? Jackson turned back to face her one final time. Colleagues treat each other with respect. Colleagues don't ambush each other on national television. Colleagues don't use their platform to settle personal scores. He took a step toward the edge of the set, then paused. You know what the saddest part of this is, Whoopi? I actually respected you. I respected your work, your activism, your contributions to this industry. I thought we were friends, or at least friendly professionals. We are, Whoopi said desperately. This doesn't have to end like this. It ended the moment you decided to make me the villain in whatever story you've been telling yourself, Jackson replied. The moment you decided that tearing me down would somehow build you up. The other hosts sat in stunned silence. The audience was completely quiet, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Even the technical crew had stopped their usual behind-the-scenes activity. I hope whatever you were trying to accomplish here was worth it. Jackson continued. I hope destroying our professional relationship and embarrassing yourself on national television was worth satisfying whatever personal grievance you've been nursing. Samuel, please. Whoopi's voice was barely audible now. Please, what? Please stay so you can continue your attack. Please pretend this never happened. Please accept that this is how you treat people you claim to respect. Jackson shook his head. I have too much self-respect for that. He began walking toward the exit, his steps measured and dignified despite the chaos he was leaving behind. Whoopi, she called after him, her voice rising in desperation. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle any criticism, any challenge to your perfect image. You're proving my point by walking away. Jackson stopped and turned around one final time. When he spoke, his voice was calm, measured, and absolutely devastating. No, Whoopi, I'm proving that I know the difference between criticism and character assassination. I'm proving that I have enough self-respect not to sit here and be verbally abused for your entertainment or your ego. And I'm proving that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone else's dysfunction. The silence that followed was deafening. Whoopi's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no sound emerged. She had pushed and pushed, expecting Jackson to eventually break down or fight back in a way that would make him look bad. Instead, he had maintained his dignity while exposing her behavior for what it truly was. This interview is over, Jackson announced to the studio and the viewing audience. Not because I can't handle tough questions, but because I won't be a party to this kind of unprofessional behavior. With that, he walked off the set, leaving behind a stunned studio and a host who had just destroyed her own credibility on live television. The cameras continued rolling for several more seconds, capturing Whoopi's shocked expression and the uncomfortable silence that filled the space Jackson had vacated. The remaining hosts looked at each other uncertainly, none of them sure how to recover from what had just transpired. The audience sat in complete silence, processing what they had witnessed, and somewhere in America, millions of viewers were rewinding their recordings, unable to believe what they had just seen unfold in real time. Whoopi had gotten the confrontation she wanted, but not in the way she had planned. Instead of exposing Samuel L. Jackson as an arrogant has-been, She had revealed herself as someone willing to destroy professional relationships for personal satisfaction. Instead of looking like a fearless journalist asking tough questions, she looked like exactly what Jackson had called her, someone conducting a hit job disguised as an interview. The show went to commercial with Whoopi still sitting in stunned silence, the weight of her actions finally beginning to settle in. But by then it was too late. The damage had been done, the lines had been crossed, and Samuel Jackson had made it clear that some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. So, what do you think? Was Samuel L. Jackson right to walk off the View set? Or should he have stayed and continued the interview? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that reveal what really happens when the cameras are rolling and the gloves come off. Because in Hollywood, sometimes the most revealing moments happen when people think nobody's watching, but in this case, everybody was.